Hi, I'm Vyviane Armstrong. I'm here at the Comitron Spring 2023. Thank you for having me. And we're going to have a little talk about fascism in our communities. Also joining us today is Drutosenton, Cosmic, and we also have Beroki joining us as spirit. He's been helping up until today when he had a little bit of a thing and needed to go. So, but pretend Beroki's here because he really helped us get this together and has been helped us with slides and a lot of things. So I'm going to click on my slides now. That's a lie. I'm not going to click on my slides. Chris, my slides went away. Apologies. I'm borrowing a computer that is nice and works. Okay. I just need to share my screen too. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, great. So just we're going to do a little housekeeping, a little prayers, land acknowledgement, those sorts of things, a little bit of discussion about the scope, and then we'll get into the actual talk. So a tiny bit of housekeeping. This is about fascism. So you're going to hear about hate and violence, offensive contempt, abuse, spiritual abuse, and then all the other isms, because fascism doesn't just go after one minority, it goes after them all, even if it's not clear about that. So there will be a lot of hateful things today. And if that is not where you are in your life, that's great. This talk is being recorded. You can come back later. You can read the transcript. You can read the slides. You can go and just look at the resource list, or you can skip it all together. Okay. If you need any accommodations, please let me know. I'm hard of hearing myself and need closed captioning and adults and help and support. So I'm very used to that. And our graphic descriptors today, my slides, all of our slides are very, very plain, and we're reading off them to stay on topic, and they're not very interesting. So we won't be giving direct graphic descriptors of that because we'll be covering it as we talk. But if we have any pictures or anything going up, we'll try to cover it. And just ping us if we don't, and we will backtrack a little bit. I want you to participate to your comfort level in this talk. We're going to start with some opening prayers. If you don't do opening prayers or you don't want to pray with me, that's fine. If you don't want to pray to Cathubodua, because that's who we're going to pray to, stick in another name. If some of the words aren't to your liking, just change the context. And then feel free to come and go and leave. And even if it's just not your thing, you can go, you can come and come back. It's all good. You won't disturb anything. We invite you to do some listening today. And the more of these little categories you fit into, the more listening we would like to hear. We encourage you to do, but we do encourage sharing as well. So do share, but let's give some space first to people who are in minorities to share first, and we will be giving priority to that if we do come down to like end of time. Right, I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. And if you look, there's a couple resources. They're also in the resource packet you'll get about this conference at the end of this talk. But if you want to real quick to acknowledge where you are, if you're in North America, Australia, Canada, there's a couple things you can click real quick for just like a quick whose land you're on currently. You can also, if you're in North America, you text your zip code to 907-312-5085, and it will text you back whose land you're on. And I encourage you, even if you do it quickly now, to go back and properly check, because there'll be more information online from the local tribes and local indigenous people that will kind of get into deeper of whose land and what context of that land you're on. I'm sitting here on Cherokee and Creek land, right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And I appreciate this land for hosting me and for letting me live here. And I appreciate this land for hosting this event and letting me broadcast from this space. And I have some just nice clean water to gift to those land spirits in appreciation. Offerings and land acknowledgement are not enough, so I also commit to continuing to decolonize my life, to learning, to listening, and to hearing. A small donation has been made to Red Women Rising as well for this talk, and to thank the gods and the land for holding this talk. And that's at the little bottom, and you can read about it. It's a really great organization. If you would like to put the lands you're in chat, please do. I'm not going to be reading them off because I'll butcher them, but do put in whose land you're coming from, if you don't mind. All right, we have 3 goals. We have an hour today. That's not a lot of time to discuss fascism. I've spent an hour just discussing like what fascism is and defining it in talks before. But we're going to do our best today. So these are our goals. We want to give you a very basic understanding of what it is. We want you to walk away understanding that white supremacy and fascism already exists in your communities. It's already there. And we want to start just acknowledging it's there so we can do something about it. And our biggest goal is to provide you with next steps for further research and work. Because again, we're going to go real quick. We're going to go through a lot of stuff. And in your resource packet, every single tiny thing we talk about has a whole website, 10 websites, a video, a book, you can dive into all these pieces later on. And now I'm going to do a short prayer, the Cathubodua and the gods of our hearth and hearts. And the gods of the hearth and hearts are the ones that hold your house, that hold this conference, and hold this group, etc. So, Cathubodua, Battle Crow, Queen of the Warband, you who knows the good fight for justice and victory. Gods of our hearts and hearts, the gods that support the space we are in today, the gods whose names we have spoken this weekend. We ask you to help us speak smoothly, keep connection clear and strong, listen carefully, hear what we need to hear, and light the fires in our hearts. Grant us strength and courage and endurance, cunning, wisdom, and the healing needed to fill our quest today and every day. As we fight injustice, racism, and anti-Semitism, let us do so in your good names, in your honor, and with your blessings and support. And we hail Cathubodua, and we hail Cathubodua, and we hail Cathubodua. Okay, a little bit more about scope. Again, we have an hour, and a lot of these things are extremely important. And I hope you don't think by us not covering them that we don't think they're important, because they are. It's just an hour. So we're going to discuss what supremacy is, the form it may take in our shared Gaul-Paul spaces, and a few hints about what to do about it. We're not going to get into, though it is equally important, the intersectionality, the historical record, political, academic, or regionally specific concerns today. But I do encourage you to look those up and become familiar with them. After this talk, please keep learning. This is a lifelong quest. I've been doing this work since, gosh, I was a Girl Scout in like 1992. I was in a really amazing troop that went to protests and stuff. Like, that's what we did as Girl Scouts. So I've been doing this for a long time, and the signs, the symbols, and the language change rapidly, especially online. But the basic fascism blueprint never does change. There is always an other. There's always someone else is the reason you have problems. As we go through this talk, you'll see more and more. There's just things that fit the blueprint, and then you also have to keep up so you know the signs and symbols and language. We highly recommend you continue your education with our resource pack, or any resource pack. You can always just Google what you need to Google, or you can talk to me, or you can ask on the Gaul chat list if we didn't cover something that you need help with. But attending classes, listening to podcasts, watching videos, reading books, becoming involved in the larger political picture where you are is very important. And then please, please, please prioritize, listen to, train with, and compensate BIPOC, Jewish, queer, Romani, and other marginalized groups affected the most by fascism. Do go out there, and I'm white, Drew's white, and we are teaching today, but definitely support this little bit by going and finding BIPOC, Jewish, queer, Romani people to learn from. We're going to use a few words today because every single time I say pagan, I don't want to say pagan, polytheist, magic user, witch, animist, heathens, and including adjacent faith and practices. So we're going to encapsulate all of that as pagan today and just kind of use that as short term. As if you were here today, you were probably under that umbrella somewhere, and we include you in it. I know we don't love the term Celtic, but it's going to come up because we don't have a better term, but it's an imprecise term covering a variety of linguistic and cultural groups, including the Irish, the Gaulish, the Welsh, the Manx, the Cornish, the Brythonic, Scottish, and Breton. And it covers a time span from Bronze Age up until present day. When we say group, we mean an online group, an in-person group, a spiritual group, a political group, a coven, a hearth, even a chat group, if you're on WhatsApp on a couple messengers, spiritual groups, covens, discords, all of that, organizations, the larger organizations, we're going to just call that a group. And we're going to use fascism, but you will also hear white supremacy, white nationalist, nationalist state, alt-right, neo-Nazi, Nazi, and dictatorship. And there's also tons of regional words for these things. But we will interchange them a little bit throughout the slides. All right. We're going to head over to Drutosenton and maybe Beroki if he's around. I've not caught up on the chat. But thank you. And I'll be monitoring the chats. If you have questions as we go through, just pop them in the chat and we will definitely get to them.
Awesome, great. Thank you, Vyviane. I guess I'll start by giving a brief introduction of myself first. I am Drutosenton or Cosmic, whichever you prefer. My pronouns are they, them. I am living on Omami Vininiwag, Ganyangahaga, and Anishinaabe land, which is unceded and unsurrendered. I am white and university educated with a focus in gender studies and particularly queer and trans theory. So that's sort of my academic home and how I'll be approaching this topic. And unfortunately, Beroki could not be here today. Hopefully he'll be able to join, although it's unclear if he'll be able to make it. So in the meantime, I'm going to read off the incredible slides that he put together, that he put so much work into, and that we really felt had to be shared because they're just really well done. And he made them applicable for a pagan lens for this presentation specifically. So I am going to try and share my screen now, and hopefully that will work. Okay, I believe I'm sharing now. So I am just going to read off of these slides very quickly. I'm going to try and get through them because we have so much to cover together in only an hour. So I apologize if I go through them very quickly. We just want to make sure that we can address all of the topics we had planned on discussing today. And like we said, these talks are all recorded. So if you would like to go back and reference them yourself, we encourage you to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to be reading off of Beroki's slides, which are Lawrence Britt's 14 early warning signs of fascism and how to apply them to contemporary pagan communities. So what is the 14 early warning signs of fascism list? So this is a list that was compiled by Lawrence W. Britt, where he originally published it in an article titled Fascism Anyone in the spring 2003 edition of Free Inquiry magazine. And the purpose of the list was to identify common characteristics or warning signs observed in historical fascist regimes. So Britt is a political scientist and author, and he analyzed the regimes of Hitler, Mussolini, Franco, Suharto, and various others. to try and distill common patterns and characteristics of fascism. And from his analysis, he derived 14 warning signs that could be used as a framework to assess the potential emergence or presence of fascism in contemporary societies. So the 14 signs that he has identified are powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights, identification of enemies as a unifying cause, supremacy of the military, rampant sexism, controlling mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government being intertwined, corporate powers being protected, suppression of labor power, disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, rampant cronyism and corruption, and finally, fraudulent elections. Sorry, I don't know why I'm not moving on to the next slide. Oh, there we are. So first is powerful and continuing nationalism. So Beroki has made these slides to sort of be informative for the viewer or listener. Evaluate the religious community and see if it promotes extreme forms of nationalism that emphasize the superiority of their faith and seeks to create a sense of exclusivity around it. So pagan fascist groups may emphasize nationalistic ideologies and promote the superiority of a particular ethnic or cultural group or identity and exclude all others, often framing them as inferior. So be on the lookout for promotion of racial or ethnic purity within paganism, excluding individuals of different backgrounds from a given group, and advocating for territorial expansion or dominance based on a distorted and usually ahistorical interpretation of ancestral lands. So number 2 is disdain for human rights. Assess whether the community disregards or undermines human rights, particularly within its own ranks or towards minority groups, using religious doctrines or beliefs as justification. Fascist pagan groups may disregard or undermine human rights, including the rights of LGBTQ+ individuals, often justifying such discrimination based on distorted interpretations of historical traditions. So be on the lookout for discrimination and persecution of individuals based on their ethnicity, race, religion, or other protected characteristics, and suppressing freedom of expression and association within their group or targeted towards external individuals or communities. Number 3, identification of enemies as a unifying cause. This is often a big one in fascism. Searching for signs of scapegoating or demonization of certain groups or individuals within or outside of the religious community with the aim of fostering unity and mobilizing support against those groups. These groups may single out and target specific marginalized groups such as LGBTQ+ folks, as well as racial and ethnic minorities, considering them as threats to the perceived quote unquote purity or cultural dominance of that group. So be on the lookout for scapegoating of religious or ethnic groups as the cause of societal problems, blaming them for the perceived decline of traditional values or cultural heritage. And I just want to make an aside here. This is often where you see a lot of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories being centered around the idea of a decline and an attack on cultural heritage. And I feel it's really important that we bring that up because anti-Semitism is unfortunately still a huge problem, both within our broader culture and within pagan spaces as well. Number 4, supremacy of the military. So determine if the community glorifies or supports militaristic endeavors, often intertwining religious and military symbols or ideologies together. Some pagan fascist groups might glorify militarism and advocate for the establishment of paramilitary or warrior cultures, perpetuating aggressive and exclusionary ideologies. So be on the lookout for glorifying paramilitary groups or militaristic ideologies within paganism, prioritizing aggressive and confrontational approaches over peaceful conflict resolution. Number 5, rampant sexism. Examine if the religious community endorses and enforces traditional gender roles, promoting male dominance and the subjugation of women within its practices and teachings. And fascist pagan groups may promote distorted understandings of tradition, enforcing a patriarchal hierarchy that strengthens social position of a quote unquote ethnically pure men and discriminates against LGBTQ+ individuals and marginalized genders. So look out for promoting rigid gender structures and the gender binary, limiting the roles and rights of women and other people within the pagan community, as well as advocating for the subjugation of women or the belief in innate gender superiority of men over women. Number 6, controlled mass media. So evaluate whether the community seeks to control or manipulate religious media platforms, using them to disseminate propaganda, fake and derogatory information about perceived enemies of the tradition, or propagating extremist ideas and worldviews. These groups may seek to control or manipulate their internal communication channels and use them to marginalize dissenting voices and further their discriminatory ideologies. So be on the lookout for utilizing propaganda and misinformation within pagan groups to manipulate their members' beliefs and perceptions, and suppressing alternative viewpoints or dissent within their own community. Number 7, obsession with national security. Assess if the community exploits a climate of fear or perceives itself as constantly being under threat, using religious doctrines to justify increased surveillance, restriction on civil liberties, or the exclusion of certain groups from participating in daily life. Fascist pagan groups often exploit fears and insecurities to promote discrimination against certain groups, such as LGBTQ+ individuals and minority ethnicities, as they are seen as a threat to traditional values or the preservation of the quote-unquote pure nation. So be on the lookout for advocating of exclusionary policies, such as immigration restrictions or deportation, in the name of protecting the perceived purity and cultural identity of the pagan community. Number 8, religion and government being intertwined. Be wary for signs of the religious community seeking to align itself with political power or using religious rhetoric to gain support and legitimacy for authoritarian or nationalistic agendas. Some fascist pagan groups may advocate for unifying religious authority with political power, seeking to enforce discriminatory policies against LGBTQ+ individuals and other marginalized groups within their communities. So be on the lookout for seeking political power and influence to enforce specific brands of beliefs and practices within society, potentially leading to the marginalization or persecution of other religious or spiritual communities. Number 9, corporate power being protected. Examine if the community forms alliances with corporate elites or engages in economic practices that consolidate powers and suppresses workers' rights, all while invoking religious justification. While not specifically related to homophobia or racial discrimination, fascist pagan groups may form alliances with corporate elites to consolidate power and influence, often with little regard for workers' rights or social justice causes. So be on the lookout for any group that forges alliance with local corporations or economic elites to advance their fascist agenda, exploiting economic disparities for their own gain. Number 10, suppression of labor power. Assess whether the religious community discourages or actively undermines labor unions and worker organizations, aiming to suppress dissent and maintain control over its followers. Fascist groups might discourage, suppress labor unions and workers' rights movements, or block establishment of smaller independent communities of interest with the aim to prevent challenges to their discriminatory ideologies. So be on the lookout for discouraging or suppressing labor movements or workers' rights within their community and promoting hierarchical structures that prioritize the interests of a select few. Number 11, disdain for intellectuals and the arts. Search for signs of the community rejecting intellectualism, artistic expression, and critical thinking, favoring instead a narrow focus on religious dogma and discouraging independent thought. These groups may display aggression towards intellectualism and artistic expressions that challenge their beliefs, favoring instead a narrow focus on traditional, quote unquote, and exclusionary interpretations of pagan beliefs. So be on the lookout for rejecting critical thinking, scientific inquiry, and artistic expressions that challenge or question fascist beliefs and narratives. Number 12, obsession with crime and punishment. Evaluate if the community places an excessive emphasis on strict observance of religious laws or engages in harsh measures to maintain control and suppress dissenting voices. Fascist groups may emphasize rigid enforcement of their own moral codes on all inside and outside of their community and hold all individuals who do deviate from their prescribed norms accountable. Look out for advocating for harsh and punitive measures against individuals or groups seen as threats to the fascist pagan ideology, potentially leading to human rights abuses and oppressive practices. Number 13, rampant cronyism and corruption. Assess whether the community exhibits widespread corruption, favoring loyal supporters and cronies within its ranks, while marginalizing or persecuting those who dissent or challenge the religious leadership. These groups may exhibit widespread corruption, favoring loyal supporters and promoting individuals who adhere to their discriminatory ideologies while marginalizing or persecuting those who oppose them or don't fit the rigid definition of an obedient follower. Be on the lookout for engaging in corrupt practices, favoritism, and nepotism within an organization, undermining the principles of integrity and accountability. And finally, 14, fraudulent elections. Search for signs of manipulation or coercion in the internal governance structures of that religious community, including the selection of leaders or decision-making processes that undermine democratic principles. Fascist pagan groups might manipulate or rig internal elections or decision-making processes that maintain control and exclude opposing voices, including those advocating for the rights of LGBTQ+ folks, ethnic minorities, and other marginalized groups. So be on the lookout for manipulating internal elections within the group to ensure the concentration of power and marginalization of dissenting voices. And with that, those are all of Beroki's excellent slides. So I will stop sharing my screen now. And Vyviane, if you want to take over and keep us going, that would be great. And I will jump in where you need me.
Excellent. Morpheus is brought up an important part and an important point, and that is none of these things on their own are diagnostics of fascism. Like all of these things exist just to exist too, and very, very rarely, this is my own input, are the fascists showing up the way we think they're going to show up. Like Charlottesville was kind of like the first time they showed up and were like, hey, look at us, we actually have the torches and the swastikas and the salutes now. So what you need to do is just keep learning about these clues and putting these clues together. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. We will be putting these clues together with people's actions as well, because people can talk a good game, but you got to watch for these things, even if they're saying, oh, we're all inclusive, everyone is welcomed, but then somehow all the minorities just don't make it, or are somehow problematic, or somehow something. You will start seeing these things, but rarely do they advertise it and make our job easy. And often when they're advertising it and making our job easy, it's kind of too late for a lot of this stuff. And we just need to be on the streets with baseball bats. And that's kind of where it's, we need like our advanced activists out there. But hopefully we won't get there too often, and we can kind of cut it off before it gets to that point. All right. So next, we're just going to talk a little bit about what does fascism look like in Gaul? And where have we seen fascism in Gaul and Celtic paganism and even just paganism in general? I know one thing that I have seen, and this is going to get into the nuanced bit. Our DNA test. DNA test, not everybody who has one is excited and gets one as a stocking stuffer as a fascist. However, the fascists in Gaul love DNA test. And so if you get on and you're like, hey, everybody, I'm 99% white and I'm Scottish and I'm really Gaul, so I'm going to worship the Gaul gods because I'm from France and all that. And then 40 other people get on there and they're like, oh my God, I'm 25% Scottish and 50% Irish and yada, yada. It kind of does their job for them, because you're putting a lot of emphasis on DNA and a lot of emphasis on sketchy DNA at that. and a lot of emphasis on heritage. So I don't suggest we all ban DNA tests and never, ever, ever talk about DNA, but I do suggest that our community leaders and yourselves think about it before you talk about it, and think about, what are you saying? What are you signaling? What are the implications of you being these heritages? And maybe work that out within yourself before you're just posting on Facebook your 23andMe. So that is one. It also helps tag. So if we have 100 people and 75 of them are saying, oh my God, I'm white, I'm white, I'm white, basically, it kind of tags those people that are not as well, and the fascists can. Yeah, Morphe says, well, the fascists will hear regardless of what you personally meant. Yes, exactly. And also, yes, those tests are really problematic anyway. Be careful who you give your DNA to. I could do like a whole thing on it, but we're not going to do that quite yet. Drew, you got anything else on DNA?
I think more so just not necessarily related strictly to what you're talking about, but sort of how we try to map modern borders onto, if we're looking as far back as, you know, the Bronze Age or earlier or later, depending on what time period and what part of the world we're looking at, usually what we now call Europe. Even knowing exactly where a person's family may have originally been for as far back as you can trace it is really kind of arbitrary unless you have some extraordinary family heirlooms and records of your own. And so trying to map on your DNA onto an imagined past that we don't really know what it looks like is also just reinforcing this idea that culture and language and heritage are inherent to the DNA, which is a talking point that fascists and white supremacists will just take and run with if we aren't careful about how we discuss DNA testing and what that means for us as a community, as well as in our broader culture.
Viticus brings up a good point. It also harks back to a timeless, ethnically pure past, which virtually never lines up with historic realities. Exactly. Oh my gosh, I would love to have a presentation on our ancestors, the Gauls, and the problematic things around it too. That would be great. Someone do that. All right. And to give you an example, because I want you to leave here with some like hard examples of what this can look like in day-to-day life. On my Discord, you can discuss your DNA test if it's really important to you, but you need to reflect on it first. And then we don't allow dogpiling. So if you've got your DNA test and it just means a lot to you and you really want to discuss or share one aspect of it, you can. Because there's other things with DNA. I know sometimes you run a DNA test and realize that your dad's not your dad, right? And maybe you have 10 brothers out there or whatever, and you can talk a little bit about that in my group, but we don't dogpile on and then start being like the whole, you know, oh, me too, me too, me too. We just do, our role as a server is to listen to that. And if it gets off topic too much, as moderators, all my moderators are trained to gently bring it back. So that's one way that you can take this and use it in your communities. All right, this is a hard one. Don't anybody yell till I get all done. And that is language. Unfortunately, because there are not actual Gauls around, like there are actual Irish folks around, there are actual Welsh folks, often the Gaulish language or some bastardization of it is taken as a pure white language, like it was the language of the whites in Europe. And I'm using a lot of finger marks here if you can't see me, but that's how they're thinking of it. And you just want to be really careful when you're using language, how you're using it. Not everybody that has a Gallic language website is okay. There is an entire giant Gaulish language website that is run by a horrible anti-Semitic, anti-Islamic person who comes into our community every 6 months to a year, I think, and with different names and different voices, but it's the same website and the same dude and the same thoughts. He's just learning to be quieter about his thoughts on the Muslims. So you just kind of want to be careful on how these languages are using and what we're thinking about these languages, and yeah, all of that. Drew?
I agree with everything you say. And I mean, I don't know a lot about the Gaulish language that we have reconstructed. I'm not sure which is more accurate, but I've definitely seen only once or twice out in the wild, if you will, people sort of talking about European languages, particularly from a period of pre-Christianization, as much as we can know about certain languages or language groups, and have seen some concerning rhetoric around it about how languages can be a unifying force for all Europeans or for all people of European descent, which is a dog whistle if I've ever heard one. So the power of language is something that can't be underestimated, and unfortunately nothing we're talking about here is free of politics, as nice as perhaps it would be if we could just live our lives and practice our faiths and have these discussions without worrying about it. But language is such an important part in a lot of people's practices, and the texts that we do have that we need to draw on and that we can construct together. Some of the incredible linguists in Gaul Chat have done fantastic jobs at working with the language. That always leaves me in awe because I know nothing about linguistics, but it just goes to show how easily something like language can be co-opted, because fascists love to take and to twist something for their own purposes, and very rarely, if at all, do they ever really create anything original. So they rely on picking and choosing and cherry picking, and I think the language can be a really great place for them to start if we are not careful in how we approach using the language and talking about that in our communities.
Mm-hmm. We can also be careful. I mean, we should all be more careful about what we share online. And I know we're all guilty of just being like, this is an awesome little GIF. Let's forward it. But some of the language stuff, if you see little like, this word means this, Google, like, who wrote that? And then Google, is it correct before you share it? Because a lot of times it looks like, yay, we're Gaulish, but it's in translation, it's more like we're folkish Gaul and proud European. Like it may not mean what you think it means. So, and of course, and I see that a lot. The memes that get shared really quickly are often language, or like, I don't know, Gaul has a magical word that means when you step on a crunchy leaf and fall and you can feel it under your feet. And we don't have that word in English. I see those kind move extremely quickly throughout our community. So just be careful what you're sharing in general, but especially with language. And another thing with sharing, when you eventually share something that's written by a fascist, because you will if you're online, unless you're some magical unicorn that, I don't know, can avoid it, follow up. Tell people like, hey guys, I shared this problematic post. This is why it's problematic. Here's some sauce on it. And let people know, like, share that and do better next time. Reflect, just take a second to reflect, like, okay, well, how did that happen? Instead of just being like, oh, I don't know, I'm a piece of shit. I shared a fascist post. Use it as a learning opportunity. Use it to write, like if your group is doing it, instead of everybody blaming one person, sit down and be like, okay, well, how did that happen? What were the steps? Not just did it get shared, but what was the thought process? What were the steps? And what are some checklists we can put into place to stop it? All right, how else does Gaullism, how else does fascism look in Gaul? Drew? You got any things you'd like to bring up?
I've been very fortunate in that I've mostly stuck to this community, and in my time in it, I haven't noticed anything personally that I've considered all that problematic or alarming. And generally, I find the community does a really great job at fostering a culture of respectful discussion and inquiry, and avoiding dogpiling or, insta banning people or treating any sort of transgression as an immediate and obvious sign that we need to come down hard on people if they've previously haven't shown any sort of inclination towards fascist thinking or sharing of dog whistles. That being said, though, no community is exempt, and I think we would do well to continue fostering the culture that we've got here, because it is so easy for fascists to slip in under the radar, and suddenly your whole Discord server is flooded with Nazis who are sharing hate speech and terrible imagery and, fake, they're spreading misinformation and things like that. So I think just I would encourage everyone in the community, as much as they're able, to take a look at resources that they can in their free time, if they have some energy and, the emotional capacity to do some heavy reading, because it is, even if it's not academic text exactly, it is really heavy subject matter, and, that needs to be acknowledged. But as much as we can all continue to learn, and I think it would also be a great idea, we've got the regional chats. So maybe if folks know about certain regional groups to watch out for, maybe we could have a conversation there. I'm not suggesting we turn the regional chats into, a place where we only share extremely heavy and disturbing content to help keep each other safe. But perhaps if there are certain regional groups that you know of, maybe you can talk about that there with, the spoilers, so people can make sure to click on the content if they want to see it, for example. But other than that, for now, I don't have a lot of specific examples that I can think of off the top of my head, because I've been very, very fortunate in that this community has done a very good job at keeping fascists away for as long as I have been in it, for the most part, as far as I can tell. So I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing, hopefully, and keep the space very explicitly anti-fascist.
Kuno said there was a fascist Gaulish inspired clothing company a while back. I vaguely remember that. And other companies, there's a couple Ukrainian, well, there's a lot of Ukrainian wood carvers, but some of them are extremely fascist. And so if you're going to sit down and have an icon of your gods made, research that person, ask around, get recommendations, things like that. There was a great thing about the French speaking anti-fascist stuff, and I wanted to read it. Oh, here we go. Lou, who I believe is over in Europe, said, interesting, I personally tend to see more fasci guys in French-speaking Gaulish spaces than international ones. Well, mostly because CG is loudly anti-fasc, yes. Yes, they are. Oh, one form that flies under the radar is cottagecore fascism. I don't know if I know what cottagecore is. That like tradwives, Morpheus? Can I put you on the camera?
Yeah. So exactly, this sort of tradwife thing, and this can be very low key and easy to miss, because it's built around an aesthetic more than an ideology. And so you'll have these like Instagram, you know, accounts that are like sort of pining for a misty past in which men were men and women were women, and you know, we hung around beautiful cottages growing our own food, and you know, having beautiful white children, but maybe they don't exactly say that. You know, it often involves like a sort of rejection of all of the ugliness of modernity, and you know, just sort of a longing for this like beautiful pagan past where everything was less complicated. And a lot of those are sentiments that in part many of us can relate to, but when you put it all together, it sort of looks a lot like the you know, Hitler propaganda about the beautiful white family procreating and, you know, making more white children. It's kind of hard to pin down because, like I said, it's more of an aesthetic than an ideology, but it supports all this, you know, very fascist stuff.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. I call it ASMR fascism
Yeah.
because it'll be like in the north, it'll be just like these very beautiful feminine women in these beautiful Norse outfits, lighting their fire in the morning, and it may or may not have like I don't know, even words on it. And she'll
Yeah.
light the fire, then she'll put the stew on, and then her husband will be there, and he's always like this hulked up, you know, fucking steroid head, and he's sharpening his sword, and it's just like 45 minutes of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I
and
also
you
want,
know, it's hard to actually like pinpoint exactly why it's fascist, but fascists love that shit, and so it's one of
yeah,
those
they do.
signals that like it's an aesthetic way of signaling a friendliness to fascism without actually sort of ever planting a flag.
Yep, yep. So be open. If somebody says, "Oh, I don't know about that," be open to hearing that and go back and look and cross-reference. And sometimes they're not even, they'll use the same pictures. If you do a Google image search, they'll use the same pictures to do like this cottage core, like I'm going to move to Iceland when I grow up kind of post. And it'll actually be on actual like Europe, swastika, stand tall kind of propaganda. So yeah. Y'all are having great chats. It's going a little fast, but I really appreciate all these chats and I will catch up. And I'm sorry if I missed some of the good stuff. I'm trying to get it. And I also want to note that I learned so much about fascism from Morpheus. That's why I turned the little camera on, because we're both in Cora Cathubodua, which has also taught me so much stuff about day to day and seeing fascism and doing something about it. And the fact that it's so multi-pronged that you have to do a lot of different things. There's no one size fits all. All right, this we have I think we have 15 minutes left, right? Kuno?
A little bit less. You have about 5.
Oh, geez. Okay, so what are we going to do about fascism? I've been talking a lot. You want to go, Drew?
Is that just the slides that we've or not the slides, rather the resource packet we've provided to sort of wrap up? Or
Yeah, let's talk about the resource packet, and then I think we made a little list on our outline too.
yeah,
And if you don't want to, I can also go through this really quickly.
I can go through at least some of it. So the 3 of us worked to pull together some resources for all of you, which will be made available after the presentation. And we have also included in that document a little bit about how to be aware of fascism and fascist dog whistles and behavior, accountability within your own community, practices to keep your community safe, training, representation, and collaboration. Those are just sort of the very broad subheads, but a little bit, for example, under accountability, we have, does your group have support and plans in place to listen to and protect your members? Under practices, we have what's your group stance on white supremacy awareness and anti-fascism. Under training, we have things like what is your group doing to train its leaders, clergy, and members in white supremacy and awareness and anti-fascism. So just questions to get everyone's minds thinking about what they have done and what they are currently doing and what they can hopefully do in the future to help make their spaces safe and to encourage broader collaboration, outreach in particular to marginalized groups, especially if your group doesn't have a lot of marginalized groups in it, or perhaps doesn't have a diverse range of people who can share their own personal experiences, reaching out and forming relationships with other groups, as well as donating when necessary, your time, your money to other endeavors to really hammer home that we are an anti-fascist organization and that we are about collaboration to really help make sure that these practices are in place and that they create a firm foundation for the organization itself.
Lou just reminded us that we tend to forget that fascist targets are wide: disabled, queer, immigrant, people of color. And it is, yes, definitely. And sometimes fascists will very cleverly divide these people up. And so you'll have like a disabled fascist or somebody pretending to be disabled. And they're like, oh my gosh, we have to fight for our rights because the government's going to put us to sleep because we're disabled, or whatever narrative they're telling. We're going to be fired because we're gay, and they will rally a fascist following around them based on one minority thing they may have, and that's really, really confusing. So know that that happens. And I just have two things that are really relevant. Well, one's really important. If nothing else, you must start listening to your BIPOC members, your queer members, your Jewish members. Because they're going to smell this stuff first, because their lives are on the line first. They're going to see this. If somebody posts a Marvin the Martian meme and you get a text that says, hey, that's fascist, did you know that? Don't just say, oh my God, no, that's a Looney Tune character. Listen to them, find out why. It doesn't mean you have to like ban all Marvin the Martians, but educate yourself, listen, think about what they're saying, and follow these things, because they always see it first, because they have to, because they're at the most danger. The next thing is you can use paganism and magic and prayers to pray about fascism. You can make agreements with spirits to keep the fascists out. You can make if you have one of the hospitality statements that we really encourage you to make, and it's in the packet, you can enshrine that into your group. You can enshrine that into your gods, and you can attach, if you are up for curses, you can attach curses or protections about that. You can work magic against the fascists. Now, you can't just do that. You still need to vote. You still need to give money. You still need to listen. But it's just one thing as pagans. It's just one extra little thing that we have at our disposal. If you are somebody who does magic or prays, you can do those things as well. All right, I think that's it. I think we're out of time, right?